If your surname is MacDonald or McDonald or McDonnell, then something in your family's story doesn't add up, and it took a laboratory to find it. You're not just Scottish by heritage, you're carrying a name that began as a claim to rule the world, held from an island fortress on Islay by men who commanded a kingdom of ships. Then came the massacre in the Glen, then the law that made the clothes illegal, then a coastline emptied of the people who farmed it. But none of that is the thing that shouldn't be there. That one's in the blood, and it's been there the whole time. Stay to the end, because the last thing this name carried across the Atlantic wasn't a crest, and it wasn't a tartan. It was a decision. MacDonald, son of Dòmhnall. And Dòmhnall isn't a soft name. It comes down from a Proto-Celtic root, dubno wallows, meaning world ruler, world mighty. The people who chose it weren't naming a son after a trade or a river or a hill. They were making a claim. In Gaelic it's MacDonald, and for 400 years the men who carried it behaved exactly as though the claim were true. The motto is still per mare per terras, by sea and by land. That's not a boast about courage, it's a statement of jurisdiction. The Dòmhnall in question was a real man, a grandson of Somerled through his son Ragnall. The traditional pedigrees push the male line further back still, to an Irish figure called Colo Wyas. That part is tradition, not record. Hold on to it because it matters later. But the claim doesn't really come from Dòmhnall. It comes from his grandfather, and his grandfather has a problem. Somerled, in Gaelic, Somerled. He's the founding figure of the entire thing, and the version of him that survives is the version of a man who took the West back. In January of 1156, he brings 80 ships against his own brother-in-law, Godred Olafsson, off the coast of Islay. They fight to a standstill and split the kingdom of Man and the isles between them. 2 years later, he drives Godred out completely and holds all of it. Argyll, Kintyre, the Hebrides. He rules from Finlaggan, a fortified island in a loch in the middle of Islay, on a scrap of ground called Alien Moor. His descendants govern from that same island for the next 300 years. In 1164, he sails up the Clyde with a fleet and dies at the Battle of Renfrew, attacking the Scottish king on his own ground. That's the story. The Gaelic lord who broke the Norse hold on the West. It's carved into every clan history written since. 800 years later, 2 people in an Oxford laboratory took it apart without meaning to. They weren't looking for Somerled. Brian Sykes and Jane Nicholson were collecting Y chromosome samples across the Highlands and Western Isles, thousands of them, and one cluster kept sitting oddly in the data. Men who had no business being related, matching each other almost exactly. Then Nicholson looked at the surnames on the donor forms. MacDonald, MacDougall, McAllister. 3 separate clans, 3 separate chiefs, 3 separate territories, and all 3 claiming descent from the same 12th century man. So they wrote to clansmen across Scotland and posted them small brushes to scrape the inside of their own cheeks. Then they did something more delicate. They approached the living chiefs of Clan Donald and its branches and asked. The results held. In one published study of 89 men of Donald's surnames, 19% carried the same modal haplotype exactly, and another 6% carried one, a single marker away. Outside those surnames it barely existed, one hit in 205 controls, and that man was a MacArthur, from an Islay family who were hereditary pipers, to Clan Donald and who also claimed descent from Somerled. Nobody has ever tested Somerled himself. His grave is unmarked. All of this is inference, triangulated backwards from living men. But it's very good inference, and it says something nobody expected. The chromosome is haplogroup R1a. In the subclade the projects have since refined, it's a lineage that's common in Norway and rare in Scotland and rare in Ireland. Read that again. The man remembered for driving the Norse out of the West was carrying, in his own male line, the chromosome of the people he drove out. Sykes put the number of living descendants somewhere around 500,000, an estimate, not a count. But sit with what it means. Roughly 1 in 4 men carrying these surnames is walking into a clan gathering with a Norwegian paternal line. Here's the part that turns the whole thing over, though. This isn't a scandal, it's a correction. Somerled's own name is Old Norse, Sumerlidi, summer traveler, a word for a Viking. He married Ragnhild, daughter of the Norse king of Man. In his own century, nobody thought he was anything other than what he plainly was: a Norse Gaelic lord in a Norse Gaelic sea. The purely Gaelic version came later. It hardened in written pedigrees that ran the male line back to Irish royalty and quietly left the North out of it. So the thing that shouldn't be there was always there. It wasn't added to the blood. It was removed from the story. If this is landing, take 5 seconds, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Because what's ahead is harder than what's behind. There's a massacre in a glen, a law that made a fabric illegal, and a coastline cleared by a man with the same surname as the people he cleared. That last one is the one that stays with you. A kingdom is an asset until it becomes a threat. In 1493, James IV stripped the last Lord of the Isles of every title and every acre he held. 3 centuries of independent Gaelic rule ended by an act of forfeiture. From that day, the name that meant world ruler belonged to a family holding its land at somebody else's pleasure. 200 years later, the government finds a use for that. The Highland chiefs are ordered to swear allegiance to William by the 1st of January, 1692. The order reaches the McDonalds of Glencoe on the 28th of December. Their chief, Alistair McCain, sets out through the snow to Fort William, and is told when he gets there that nobody present has the authority to take his oath. 60 miles further on, at Inverarray, he finally swears it, on the 6th of January, 6 days late. Sir John Dalrymple, Secretary of State for Scotland, had been waiting for exactly this. His letters survive. He writes about rooting out that damnable sept. On the 13th of February, soldiers who'd been eating at McDonald tables for a fortnight killed their hosts in the dark, and the Glencoe men were cattle raiders with a long charge sheet. That's an argument for prosecuting them. It isn't an argument for billeting the soldiers with them first. Glencoe was a warning shot aimed at one branch of one clan. What came 50 years later was aimed at every one of them, and it didn't need a single soldier to break a single door. You can't outlaw a bloodline, you can outlaw everything it wears. After Culloden in 1746, Parliament passed the Act of Proscription. From the 1st of August 1747, it was a criminal offense for a man or boy in the Highlands to wear tartan or Highland dress. First offense, 6 months in prison. Second offense, transportation for 7 years, put on a ship to the colonies, whether you'd meant to go or not. Alongside it came the Heritable Jurisdictions Act, which had royal assent that June and abolished the legal authority of the chiefs outright. A McDonald chief had held court over his own people for 600 years. Now he was a landlord with a rent roll. 2 things that law didn't do, whatever you've been told. It didn't ban the Gaelic language, and it never classed bagpipes as a weapon of war. Those stories grew afterwards. And it never banned the name McDonald either. That happened to the McGregors, not to Clan Donald. It didn't need to. You don't have to forbid a name once you've dismantled everything that gave it meaning. The ban ran 35 years and was repealed in 1782, by which point most Highlanders had stopped wearing the stuff anyway. The law took the clothes. What came next took the ground. Here's the sentence that's hardest to say out loud. The man who signed the eviction notices at Solace had the same surname as the people he was evicting. North Uist, 1849, 4 years into the potato failure. On the 15th of May, notices of ejection were served on the tenants of Solace, somewhere between 600 and 700 people. They asked for a delay, just long enough to sell their cattle at a decent price and make the crossing before winter. They got no answer at all. The evictions began in July. On the 2nd of August, the police came out from Inverness, and the township refused to go quietly. It was the women who led it, pelting the officers and the demolition men with stones off the beach while the roofs came down behind them. There's a stream near there still called Abhain Nafala. the stream of blood. The landlord was Lord MacDonald, and the honest version includes this. His estate was financially wrecked, the famine was real, and he was one of many Highland proprietors that decade who worked out it was cheaper to ship people than to feed them. It's still a McDonald clearing, McDonald's off McDonald ground. The people put off that shore had somewhere to go. They'd been going for 70 years already. They went to Cape Breton. Overwhelmingly, from the Uists and Barra and Skye, they went to Cape Breton, into Antigonish County, in Prince Edward Island, in 2 counties in eastern Ontario, Glengarry and Stormont, where so many Clan Donald families landed that the locals simply called it McDonald country. A North Uist rental roll from 1827 lists over 50 families with the same note written beside the name, gone to America. It meant Cape Breton, and the most famous MacDonald of all had gone ahead of them, for a reason almost nobody expects. Flora MacDonald was 24 when she took Charles Edward Stuart out of the Hebrides to Skye after Culloden, dressed as her maid. She was arrested for it, taken to London, and released in 1747. Then in 1774, not exiled, not hunted, just broke, she and her husband sailed to North Carolina and took a farm at Cheeks Creek. 2 years later, her husband and one of her sons were captured at Moores Creek Bridge, fighting for King George against the American revolutionaries. The farm was confiscated. She went home to Skye with nothing. She'd risked her life for a Stuart prince, and then raised men for a Hanoverian king. That's not hypocrisy. It's the same instinct, loyalty to the people standing in front of her, pointed wherever the ground had shifted. That's the name. Not a coat of arms. A decision made under pressure, over and over, by people who kept on making it. Somewhere tonight, someone with this surname is going to open a set of DNA results on a laptop, not the PIE chart. Everybody looks at the pie chart. Further down, in smaller type, there's a line for the paternal haplogroup, and it reads R1A. They'll search it, because it means nothing to them, and the first thing back will be a map with Norway on it, and they'll assume it's a mistake, because everything anyone ever told them about this family said Scotland, said Highlands, said islands, and clearances, and a crossing, and there's a photograph somewhere in the house of a great-grandmother nobody can place anymore. So they'll search again, and 2 or 3 pages down, they'll find a 12th century warlord with a Norse name and a Gaelic kingdom, and the whole thing will quietly reassemble into something older and stranger than the story the family kept. If your surname is McDonald, that line in the results isn't an error. It's the oldest true thing the name has. A name that meant ruler of the world, carried by people who ended up owning nothing, and handed forward anyway. Drop your surname in the comments below. I want to know which one you carry, and which part of this hit closest, the laboratory, the Glen, or the crossing. And if you're a McDougall, a McAllister, or a MacArthur, you're carrying the same marker, so say so. Half of Cape Breton and Glengarry County just recognize their own townships.